Alright, so now we're going to continue our straight-to-video series with something that I didn't really have high hopes for when I saw it, but that actually changed because I keep getting surprised by this series, the Hostel series, which we've talked about the first one before, but when it came out, the first one, it was the one where it was like, there was warnings about, how extreme it was, and how, if your heart's in bad condition or something, it could be fatal to you or something. They just, really, really blew it up as this sort of really visceral experience in general. And it was, right after Saw, and so these two are kind of... This and Saw are often paired together when talking about this sort of shift in horror at the time. And it is a moment in horror that is often criticized, and for understandable reasons. The whole torture porn idea, where it doesn't seem like there's much to it apart from just killing people while they scream and you torture them for very long periods of time, for very long scenes. I can get it, but for some reason, this movie in particular always stuck out to me because it's got the first movie has a really great slow burn quality to it. Its concept is really twisted and interesting in the way it kind of looks at human nature, and the thing that I like the most, that I think is sort of underrated about it, is the idea of people not liking torture porn because there is a difference between being gory for the sake of being gory and being actually scary, and how we kind of got away from the scary angle, it seemed, for the purpose of just going in on gore and torture and stuff like that. But what I like about the first Hostel is that I feel like it's underrated in the sense that it combines the two. Like, it was able to make gore scary, and I feel like those things are actually both working at the same time, and that's what Eli Roth pulled off with this first movie. And what continues to surprise me is I remember liking Part 2 when it came out, which I don't think I've really talked about much on this channel, but here's the thing. I've rewatched Part 2 recently, and I was really surprised how well it held up, for those same reasons I was talking about with the first movie. But also you have stuff like Heather Montage's performance, and the way she committed to that torture scene, physically, is insane. She's like a known actress, and it's like, imagine telling a known actress, oh, we're gonna hang you upside down for a very long period of time while you're cut open and bleeding everywhere. That's one thing in itself. Then there's the whole idea of do a scene fully nude, and then that's going to be something that's like, oh, I don't know about that, and just all of this at the same time. It's a fully nude scene, she's hanging upside down for real, and it's super, super gruesome. And, I'm always lightheaded by the end of that scene. And the physical commitment by her, and not to mention she has to be acting, terrified this whole time, very convincingly. It's one of, the standout scenes in horror, at least in the decade of the 2000s. And then you go to... Hostel Part 2 has an incredible third act, just altogether. The whole idea with Roger Bart's character and his friend, and how one of them is, really into it, and you can tell he's just, craving committing his first murder, and then you have the friend that's, kind of apprehensive. And in the way those personalities drastically switch as they go into the climax, it's really fantastic. So, going into a third movie that has a different setting and doesn't have Eli Roth involved at all is something that seems like it might be sort of bleak. And not in, the sense of the movie's tone, but, quality-wise, how's this going to be in general? Well, the director that took over is Scott Spiegel, who we've talked about, who has that Tarantino connection. We talked about him in the From Dusk Till Dawn video we did earlier this month. And so we're setting in Vegas now. And that's something that kind of immediately is like, okay, if you're going to change the setting and bring it to America, I could see things you could do with this. And it doesn't drop the ball, concept-wise, about bringing this concept to Vegas. It pretty much does exactly what you would want it to, and sort of capitalizing on that idea, as far as adding these twisted concepts of they're being tortured for an audience, and this audience is betting, and the idea, the different tiers of, when they have Skylar Stone, who's, the first sort of torture scene we're seeing here, and the bets range from like how are they gonna beg? Like, are they gonna say, "Oh, I have a family"? Are they gonna say, "Oh, I can give you money"? And it's like, which one of those is it gonna be? And that's what the betting pool is. That's just one of the betting pools. That's really twisted. And there's the scene later with John Hensley and the crossbow, where it's like, how many arrows is it gonna take to kill him? And that's fucked up in a really glorious way that really sort of expands the concept of this movie and this series in a really interesting way. And that's, yeah, I'm actually really happy with how this third movie came out when you would have such low expectations for it already. Because a lot of people have low expectations for this series in general, but like I said, it's really surprisingly good every time I come back to it, which is not often. You can only take so much. But yeah, I'm always surprised by this trilogy, and so especially the way they open it. They open this third movie, where there's first of all visually, I kind of gave Spiegel a lot of shit for like how much he was trying the inspired visuals and from Dusk Till Dawn 2 and how that kind of got into overkill. Here, there's actually some inspired moments, like this opening scene where there is a shot that looks like a normal shot, and then we realize it's like a mirror on a door, and they come through it, like the hunting club comes through it. It's really inspired. There's a great moment where they drive off with the couple, and you can see the title is above, like where the street is, as a light, but before it pans up to the title, you can see the title reflecting off the back of the car window. And it's not a physical sign that's there, it's just the title of the movie coming up. Visually, I thought that was really cool and inspired. And also just this opening scene where they introduce... There's quite a few things that this one does, where it's like, okay, you now know the concept and the formula of these two movies, so how are we going to play with that a little bit? And they do that, but they don't, like, betray the series by doing that. They don't, like... It's not like saying a fuck you to the other two movies. It's just like, okay, now that you know this, we're going to toy with you a little bit by taking those expectations and slightly turning them, or slightly doing a bit of a reverse effect. Starting with the introduction of this character, Travis, who, by all accounts, looks like the guy that's going to be like the opening victim of the movie. It just seems very sort of unassuming. He's almost touristy, like he's out of place. And then he meets this couple, and of course they're like Ukrainian, I think. So they're playing with the idea already of two people meeting from two different countries, and typically the one that's not American in this series is the one that's gonna take you off and have you tortured. And so, of course, with a setting change, Travis is the one that's part of the hunting club and takes this couple hostage and takes them back to be tortured and killed. So right away, you're already getting vibes of, okay, so it's aware of where we are now, and it's going to be a little different and throw us off a little bit, and that's going to be really fun. And then we're introduced to our main characters. We've got a really nice cast here with Kip Purdue and John Hensley, I mentioned, from Teeth, Skylar Stone from back in the old Comedy Central days. And I'm not too familiar with who the main guy is, but it's a good cast. And so, it's one of those things also where you think like you wouldn't necessarily need strong performers like for a movie like this. But you really do, because like we were talking about with the Heather Matarazzo scene, that commitment and that playing terror and fear for long periods of time, and as you like die slowly, that's gonna take some serious acting to make that convincing. And they do it here. Hensley especially is really good at playing fear in that crossbow scene, and as we saw his fate in Teeth as well, he has experience, but yeah, so the thing about this also, and I talked about the Skylar Stone scene and how they do the betting pool stuff like that. They also throw in stuff like he has his face cut off, and we're often getting point of view shots of this, and that stuff where it's like, where I've talked about how they make gore scary in the other movies. Just by sort of watching this happen and being stuck in there, being trapped in these scenarios with the person. Because they don't really cut out of the torture scenes until they're finished. So we are stuck in the room with them until this is over. And so to take this approach where we're getting Skylar Stone's point of view as he's getting his face cut off, takes that into a whole new place of putting us in the shoes of the person that's being tortured, and how terrifying it is from their point of view. So I really liked that directorial flourish as well. And then you've got some new ways of killing where you don't always need gore. So we have stuff like, it sort of reminds me of the kills in like Theater of Blood, the Vincent Price movie, where they're very unconventional. There's one in particular involving bugs that's very memorable and wild. And the idea that this girl is essentially smothered with... We get that point of view shot again of them going down her throat, and she essentially smothers in bugs. Is just such a horrible way to go, and no gore is involved. It's actually kind of a plot point that no gore is involved, because they're able to take a picture of her corpse to say, oh, she's sleeping and she's drunk, in order to lure the rest of the crew into what eventually becomes the climax. So that felt really smart also. And the fact that when you have stuff like the crossbow death, where like it is long and torturous and scary, but it's not like really overdoing it in gore, but it still has the same effect. And that's not to take away from, the gory scenes that work also. But the fact that you can do both gory and not gory and make this concept work is something that I think is really cool. So there's all that, and I also like the feeling of helplessness, where we have the guy from the opening scene, the guy that was in the couple, who's held hostage in this cage for quite some time throughout the movie. And so we get to the point where there's always going to be moments in movies like this where somebody screams. Like it plays on the predictability of how a victim is going to react by not only just the betting pool stuff, but also when our main character is trapped and he's saying, like, you better not hurt my friends, I'm gonna kill you, wait till I get out of here. And by this point in the movie, this guy that's been here since the beginning is just like, they all say that. Like you're just another... this is basically like watching the same movie 50 times, watching these people say, oh, I'm gonna get out of here, and it just makes the lead character feel so helpless. And us as the audience watching this, and it's like, yeah, we know this is pretty, it's a pretty bleak scenario to be in, and your rage is only going to get you so far. Your rage is only going to prolong your feelings until you get too terrified and frightened. And so I like that, and having that character there for like the whole movie to represent that. And then we've got this interesting switch where they meet the two girls in Vegas, and they go around with them, and then that's when all hell starts to break loose. But you get the idea throughout the series of it's whoever you end up meeting is going to end up being part of the elite hunting club, and that's going to be the thing. So it's like never meet new people when you go out and you do the whole Vegas thing or whatever, or in any place, as the other movies show, because they might drag you back to be tortured. So the idea of introducing these girls, and the girls end up not being part of the reason they end up in not being part of the hunting club, but the person that brings them in is Kip Perdue, who has been their friend the whole time, and who has a long history with them. And that idea of the person you knew the whole time is the one that was setting you up is a whole new twist on what's going on here and how to use this concept. And it's one of those great things also to where he does seem different from the group, like he's at some sort of higher level. He's like the Bradley Cooper part of the Hangover crew. And so when you see him and he makes that turn, it's like, I buy it. It makes perfect sense that this is a guy that would be part of the elite hunting club. It's just, as soon as the switch flips, it's like, perfectly makes sense. Should have totally seen that coming. And you see it, in his performance, his demeanor changes. He starts to go a little ham, but it's a lot of fun to see Kip Perdue go mad. And then we get this moment the moment that we always wait for in the Hostel movies, where the fighting back starts to happen, and it essentially becomes... They love to plaster Tarantino's name on these movies, and one thing where that really comes through, even though he really has nothing to do with them apart from getting them out there, is they always turn into revenge movies, and very, very satisfying revenge movies, and this is no exception. If anything, this takes it to another level because it's somebody that he's always known, and it's a deeper betrayal between the characters. And so there's even this nice little double meaning that goes on as the hunting club starts to completely lose control of everything. When they lose control of the main character, when they say they're trying to calm their clients, and they say there's been an interruption of power, and of course they mean the electricity has gone off, but also the power shift. I thought that was a really nice sort of play on words when they do that announcement. And just visually, like the idea of, because the main character is getting married, they put married to the girl that Kipper wants, so this is why all of this is happening. They put him in the white tux before they're going to torture him, and just the idea of the white tux, basically being made to for blood to show up on, is a really nice sort of visual to go with. And yeah, and then we get our final moment where we think he's blown up and Kipper has gotten away, and this whole thing's just gonna sail off into the sunset of evil. And then we get our last moment of the satisfying revenge movie reaches its peak in this final moment, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I really don't think he could have survived the explosion, because we see him get engulfed, and he's just doing a slight Two-Face thing. Doesn't really matter. It's just the final sort of epilogue to make it this satisfying, over-the-top revenge movie, and I'm perfectly okay with that. So, yeah, a straight-to-video Hostel sequel sounds like, this is gonna be the laziest, most cash-grabby thing ever. And there were like 4 years between Part 2 and Part 3. But no, this trilogy is surprisingly good, in my opinion, at least. And I thought the third one actually carried itself alongside these two pretty well. But yeah, that's how I guess you could almost say there's even more of a playful quality that Spiegel has, that whereas Roth kind of stays sort of as grounded and serious as possible for the most part. But I still think all of these are satisfying at the end of the day. Like I said, I totally get how unappealing they could be to a lot of other people. But I feel like they use their concept and, their approach to violence and torture in a pretty smart way, as far as telling a horror story that's meant to instill actual fear and not just, oh, look at all the gory stuff we're doing. So that's how I feel about these. So I think we're going to go ahead and do another straight-to-video thing right after this, and we're going to kind of be all over the place as we sort of pile into the end of the month here. I'm sure we're going to bleed into November, because I got behind for about a week, but we're going to get there, and we'll get all this stuff out there, and hopefully you're into it. So until the next thing, I think that's it.